Bible. We should when someone dies as soon as possible, within 5 to 6 hours, family prepare body to bring it here. Before bringing here, body must wash at home. After washing, some perfume and some butter apply on body. Then body wrapped in white shroud and it put on bamboo stretcher. Then four-person, after putting on bamboo stretcher, every relative, family member, then whoever comes, they offer a brocaded shroud on the body and decorate nicely with flower and all. Then bring it here. And when body got here, first they dig whole body into river to purify it. And we believe that Ganges water with the same. So first purification, and then everyone who comes to the body offer fire and some water in the mouth of the same person. They leave the body on this place for a while, and then they buy wood. One body needs 360 kilogram wood. So they make a fire, 6 feet long, 4 feet wide, 3 feet high, and they put the body on top, then one more layer of wood, and then set fire. The person who set fire to the body, then the person who becomes the chief mourner, should be eldest son. If there is no eldest son, any son or any nearest relative male member become the chief mourner. So chief mourner, first he gets his head shaved, then take a dip in Ganges and wears white clothes untailored, and then he receives eternal fire from the owner of the crematorium, and with eternal fire makes 5 round around the body and 6 fire. It takes 2 to 3 hours body completely reduced gases. Family must wait until the body completely reduced gases. And at the end of the cremation, last part of body, in case of man, chest one is the last. In case of lady, pelvis one is the last. So last part, something like a half kilo, flesh or bone, whatever, thrown in the Ganges by the chief mourner. Then chief mourner takes the water of Ganges and pours on remaining fire. Extinguish fire, and that's all. Then all the mourners go to next heart. They take a dip there, and then they go home and mourn for 13 days. Every day some prayers, some rituals. On last day, they do faith. Cremation is not just funeral for a ceremony. Cremation is a sacrament. And in Hinduism there are several sacraments. There are total 16 sacraments. And cremation is the last one. So as it is sacrament, it is right of every Hindu to be.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me in this Humanities Speakers series. I was asked by the Humanities Department at the Osceola campus of Valencia College to do a presentation, and I thought the most appropriate presentation that I could do would be one on world travel. For those who don't know me, my name is Mark Guillette, and I am a sociology professor at both the Osceola and Poinciana campuses. I've been teaching at Valencia for over 25 years, and I thoroughly enjoy my job. Your humanities instructors may not completely get too excited about what I'm getting ready to say, but I do believe that sociology is the most fascinating thing that you can study in college. So if you've not studied sociology, I highly recommend that you consider it. Sociology is a scientific study of human society. So as a sociology professor, not only when I go traveling, not only do I get to learn a lot about other people and other cultures, I ultimately learn a lot about myself. And so traveling is one of my biggest hobbies. And I've been very, very fortunate to have traveled to every state in the United States. I've traveled to all 7 continents, and I've had the opportunity to travel to about 60 countries around the world. So let me kind of finish getting us set up here, and then we're going to get started right away. So let me get rid of that. And I am going to put myself down here in the bottom and increase the size of the screen that you can focus more on what I'm showing you rather than me. All right, so if you have any problems hearing or seeing me, please put that in the chat box. Now, everyone should have access to the chat box regardless if you're watching this on a desktop, a laptop, a mobile device like an iPad or a cellular phone. So if you have any problems throughout the presentation, please put them in there, and I will be periodically looking at my tablet to see if there are any issues that I'm aware of, because I'm basically just sitting here and looking at a screen. And unlike things like Zoom, you can't very easily just say, hey, there's an issue or a problem. So put that, any concerns in the chat box. In addition to that, I would like to try to make this as participatory as possible. So as I go through and show you some of my adventures around the world by showing you some pictures and some videos and telling you stories, if you have any questions, feel free to type those in the chat box. We only have, at this point, about 57 minutes for me to talk about my world travel, so I don't want to get bogged down on any one particular trip or site, because I'd like to expose you to as many different places as possible. So I'm going to kind of go at a quick pace. There may be places that you see in my list of pictures that you would like me to talk about. However, I will not talk about all of them because we don't have time, number one. But number two, I have some interesting stories I'd like to share with you about certain places, and I don't have interesting stories per se about every place I've been. So I will try to steer us in the right direction and make this as educational yet interesting as possible. Now, it is very important that if you are a Valencia college student and you're attending this live event to get some type of credit for one or more courses, it is very important that you put your first and last name along with your Valencia identification number in the chat box. At the end of the presentation, actually it takes about 24 hours for YouTube to properly process this video and me have access to the chat box. So once that is completed, I will go in, look at the chat box, write down names, VID numbers, and report it to the appropriate person so that you can get credit for it. But if you don't put that information in the chat box, I will not be able to report it to the people that need it in order for you to get the extra credit. So simply your first name, your last name, and your Valencia identification number. I will leave this on my YouTube channel if you want to come back later and view it again, but what I will do is I will block the ability of other people to see the chat in the future, so that if you have any concerns about your name showing up, it won't show up. Okay, and your Valencia identification number is not something like your social security number. It's something very unique to Valencia students, so no one can do anything with that number per se. But it is important that you do that if you want credit. If you don't want credit and you're just here to hang out and follow me around the world, then that's wonderful. Great, thanks for joining me. I would be amiss if I didn't say, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on notifications. I have over 600 videos on my YouTube channel of all kinds of things, not only my travels around the world, but I have other hobbies. I'm very interested in astronomy and space. I do volunteer work for NASA. I do live YouTube events once a month about different astronomy and NASA related events. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you might want to come back and join me. I have one this coming Sunday night at 8 o'clock where I will be talking about galaxies. All right, I think I've taken care of all the basics of what's going to happen here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have a faculty website, and this is my faculty website that you're looking at. I do need to update this picture. It's a little old, a couple months old. But you can link to this from my YouTube channel in the About section if you'd like to go back and take a look at this later. But I'm going to go to the My Pictures section. Here are some, though not all, of the places that I've traveled to, again, both within the U.S. and around the world. It also includes other things, different adventures and activities that I have taken part in. One of the things that I would like to do is encourage you and inspire you to what I call live life. Folks, if you don't know it, life is very, very short. And I know too many people that waited until they were older to decide to start living life. And that's not a good decision, because we never know what the next hour will hold for us, the next 2 hours or day or week or year. So you might think, well, gee, some of these places, it takes money to go to these places. And that's true. But there are budget things that you can take a look at, budgeting. But you don't have to live life by traveling to Antarctica, per se. You live life by not being afraid and going out and trying things. Too many people are afraid to live life, and they sit on their couch, on their cell phones, doing this. Okay? And to me, this is not life. Okay? This is a fake life. Life is out there, and we only get one time to do this. Life is very short. So balance studying hard, getting a job, working hard, with living life. And that's a hard balance to kind of keep track of at times, but it's an important balance to try to figure out and to try to maintain. So I hope that I inspire you to travel, because travel is one of the most awesome things that you can do. It will radically change the way that you look at others, and will probably lead to you changing how you look and define yourself. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was 23 years old before I ever got into a plane for the very first time. And I was in my mid to late 20s before I ever traveled abroad. But I quickly learned that traveling is really, really cool, and you learn so much, and it's so exciting. The first place I'd like to take you to is Antarctica, the South Pole. And the reason I'd like to take you there is because very, very few people ever get the opportunity to go to Antarctica. The only people that live in Antarctica are scientists. And I say this because no one lives there permanently. But scientists from different countries around the world will travel to Antarctica to study a variety of different things, like, for example, the native life, like penguins. So it's really cool to be able to go there and see them in their natural environment, rather than, let's say, going to SeaWorld and seeing them behind glass. But scientists will also study other things like global climate change. And so you get to see all kinds of neat things that you won't see in a lot of other places around the world. Like, we don't see too many of these here in Florida. This is the ship that we traveled on. I was up on top of a mountain looking down. It looks like a relatively small ship, and it is, compared to like a Disney or Royal Caribbean ship that can accommodate, thousands of people. This ship only accommodated about 100 people. All right, we left out of the very tip of South America. It's about a 2.5-day journey or cruise down to Antarctica. We spent about 7 days cruising around. And because there are no hotels, there are no Walmarts and restaurants, we basically stayed on the ship, got off each day, walked around, got to see some of the wildlife, like a seal, the other penguins, the icebergs, and got back on the ship and cruised to the next spot. So Antarctica, a really cool place to live. I'm sorry, a really cool place to travel. Not a cool place, being a little play on words here. It's very cold there to live. All right, I'm going to keep us moving here. Let me check the chat box real quick, make sure I'm not overlooking anything. Nope. All right, very good. Don't forget about the chat box. If you have any questions, then pop them in there. I'm going to take us to Australia next. One of the things that I love to do when traveling abroad is to visit the grocery stores, because the food that we eat actually tells us a lot about who we are. So yes, this is the same product that you would buy at your local grocery store that we call Rice Krispies. They call that same product Rice Bubbles in Australia. Why? I have no idea, but it is the same product. This might look familiar to some of you, and if you look without really reading, you're going to go, oh yeah, that's Burger King. Well, tastes like Burger King, looks like Burger King, smells like Burger King, but they call it Hungry Jacks. Yeah, and this is in Australia. One of the neat things about going to Australia is you get to see animals that you won't see anywhere else in the world other than like in a zoo. And there you have a kangaroo. Kangaroos are much like deer here, where you might be driving down the interstate and see lots of deer all over the place. The same thing goes for Australia. And also you have really cute koala bears. All right. I often will take a day in my sociology classes, another plug for sociology if you haven't taken it, it's really awesome. I will take some time to show pictures, and you will see that I have McDonald's in many of the places that I've traveled to. And it's not that I'm a big fan of McDonald's per se. I actually very, very infrequently will travel to McDonald's. But McDonald's is one of the biggest exports from the U.S. around the world, and there are very few places I've ever traveled to that there's not a McDonald's. The only two that come to mind would be Antarctica and Iceland. Iceland has no McDonald's. They use the metric system over in Australia, as does most of the world, and so their signs are all in metric. Over in Australia, as is the case in many countries around the world, like the UK and Japan, when you drive a car, you drive on the right-hand side. And so here's a car that we rented, and here's a picture looking from the, let's see, where is it? The back seat to the front seat. And so the driver sits on the right, you have a passenger that can sit on the left. It's really interesting because over here, we all know this in the U.S. to be our blinkers. And on this side, we know this to be our wipers. But in countries that drive on the other side of the road, it's the other way. So you turn your blinkers on over here and you turn your wiper on over here. So it takes some real getting used to when you're driving around, because what you're doing is constantly putting your wiper on rather than your blinker, which will be over here. So good stuff. I had the opportunity to go snorkel the Great Barrier Reef. And here's an example of what I was talking about earlier about living life. You don't have to fly to Australia, which is a very, very long trip. We're talking probably about 24 hours of travel from your home to where you are staying. And then take a boat and go out with snorkel gear and snorkel the Great Barrier Reef. We have places right here in Central Florida, like Wekiva Springs, that you can go snorkeling. It won't cost you very much money at all. A little gas to get there, a little money in buying the snorkeling gear. But if you've never snorkeled, kind of like the Disney movie, I think it's The Little Mermaid, it's a whole new world. It truly is an incredible experience if you've never gone snorkeling. It is truly a whole new world. So try it out. It's really cool. All right. This is the Sydney Harbour Bridge here in the background, and this is the famous Sydney Opera House where you can take in a show or a play. And they have what's called a bridge climb experience. And so on Christmas morning, the year that we went, many years ago, 2007, my husband and I did the bridge climb, and we climbed up to the top of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So here's a picture of part of downtown Sydney with the famous Sydney Opera in the background. So lots of cool things to do. This is the city of Melbourne, kind of on the south coast of Australia. And this, I think it's this building here, is the tallest building in the city of Melbourne. And they have what's called an edge experience. And the edge experience is basically an elevator that slides out of the building rather than one that goes up and down. So this is us in a glass bottom elevator that has slid out of the building. And so you can, in this case, I think it's 77 floors. You can look 77 floors straight down, and it's a pretty unique experience. I think there are a couple of these in the U.S. I think there's one in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. So if you ever get the opportunity to go there or ever hear about these, they're really cool. All right. I'm going to keep us moving, and I'm going to go on to the next place. Snorkeling is fun. It's a lot of fun. Brazil. So we went to Brazil back in 2003. One of the things that I love about Brazil is the culture. Brazilians, I believe, have a different view of the world than we Americans. Americans are very, very focused on making money. And that is important. It's important to make money so we can pay our bills and do the things that we like to do, like travel. But I think maybe sometimes we get it out of balance, and we are so consumed by working that we forget that life is short. We only get to do this once, and we should have some fun in the process of living life. And so I think they look at life quite differently than we do. This is the city of Rio de Janeiro. It's a beautiful city. Lots of beautiful mountains, of course, beautiful beaches, a lot of people, as you can see here, a lot of different homes and apartments and so on and so forth. If you travel out into the Amazon, and we took a couple days and traveled out to the Amazon, you can see the animals in their natural environments, and that's something I always like to do. I'm not a big fan of zoos, keeping animals enclosed in areas for our entertainment. So it's really neat to be able to see these animals, like these monkeys, in the Amazon rainforest. So that was really cool. Had a unique opportunity. When we were there, we went to the city of Brasilia. Brasilia is the capital of Brazil. And this man here, Lula, had just been elected the president of Brazil, I think 2 months prior to us seeing him. He's pointing to this man here. This man is Oscar Niemeyer. I don't know if you study architecture in humanities or maybe a different class, but Oscar Niemeyer was a world-famous architect and was responsible for designing most of the very modern-looking buildings in the Brazilian capital of Brasilia. For example, this church. He designed this church. Okay, so it was kind of a neat opportunity that we just kind of ran into. I believe that Lula was or currently is in jail for corruption. Maybe some of our politicians should be in jail for corruption, but that's another story for another day. All right, let's keep us moving. Lots of pictures, lots of places I'd like to show you. My husband is Filipino, and so we went and visited some of his family in Manila, which is the capital and the largest city in the Philippines. And unfortunately, as a developing country, as a relatively poor country, you see a lot of this in developing and poor countries. Kids in the streets begging for money for the family, selling things like this young boy was selling I don't know what this is, to people that were passing by in automobiles. So it's kind of difficult when you travel to a poor country and you see all of the poverty. In sociology, we talk a lot about poverty, and there is a poverty problem in our country. There's a growing gap between the rich and the poor, where the rich are sucking up more and more of the wealth, leaving less and less for the middle class and the poor. But even though poverty is a very big problem in the US, it definitely is, poverty in countries like the Philippines or other developing or third world countries is a much more severe problem. And here you see a community where a lot of people live. This is kind of right off of an interstate, and it's not pretty. And it's one thing to see something like this in pictures. It's, you know, if you see it in a documentary, but it's a whole other thing to actually see it with your own eyes. That changes everything, because life is all about perspective. And if you've never seen anything like this and how bad it can be, it changes you. It really does change you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to another place, or check the box here. Clown, what did I see for my, when I was, what do you call it, snorkeling? Colorful coral. I saw coral, unfortunately, that's being severely damaged by global climate change. I don't know if I saw any clownfish. I don't recall. All right, let's go on. I hope that you all are enjoying this. Lots of cool places to travel to. Someone mentioned Japan, Jack. So Japan is an awesome place to visit. Very expensive place to visit, but a really neat cultural experience. So this is Tokyo Tower. This is a view of Tokyo. Tokyo is the largest city in Japan and is one of the largest cities in the world. To kind of give you an idea of how big Tokyo is, New York City, I believe, has roughly 12 to 15 million people, roughly. Tokyo has somewhere between 35 and 40 million people, roughly. These are real rough estimates. So Tokyo is significantly bigger than the biggest city within the US, New York City. Really, really big city. Now, one of the things that the Japanese are known for is their awesome public transportation system. They have an awesome way of getting around, regardless if you're going from one city to the next city, where you can use something like a bullet train like this one or this one. They also, within cities, have light rail or subway systems that are excellent. Because of their awesome transportation system, a lot of people will opt to take public transportation, public buses, light rail, subways, and bullet trains, rather than everyone owning a car like here in the US. And so that was a really neat experience to be able to get around with no problem anywhere that we wanted to go. And these bullet trains can go well over 200 miles per hour. So they're very good. Now, I don't know if any of you are very familiar with Amtrak. Amtrak is the national railroad system that we have here in the US. Though it can be good, it's often late. And when people depend on their transportation to get them to where they need to be on time, if they know they're not going to get there on time, they're not going to use it. So very few people use like Amtrak in the US because it just doesn't run on time very often. There are reasons for that, but I won't go into that right now. Japan seems to have gotten something right, and that's their public transportation. All right. I don't know how many of you are familiar with one of these. For those who are not familiar with this is what's called a squat toilet. It's a toilet. This is very common in many different countries around the world. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but basically instead of sitting down on a toilet to do your business, you squat over this. Now some of you may go, oh, well, that's kind of weird. Well, what's weird? Weird is something that we generally are not familiar with. Anything that we aren't familiar with is generally weird. But there's nothing weird about this. In fact, here are a couple facts about using squat toilets. Number one, I'm not a biologist. This is not my area of expertise, but apparently when we squat rather than sit, we allow our intestines to more freely move, let's say, material through the system. But when we sit down, what we are doing is we are pinching our intestines, making it more difficult to do our business. And we don't want to strain, per se, when we do our business, which can lead to medical problems and complications. So it's actually healthier to squat than it is to sit down. Number two, it's more sanitary. We are in this COVID situation, and we are all carefully washing our hands and wearing our mask. But, you know, before this, people often wouldn't think about, you know, grabbing a door handle or sitting down on a toilet seat in a public place without cleaning it appropriately. Well, when you use a squat toilet, you don't have to sit on anything. You're not putting your body on anything. So that makes it more hygiene. Now, there could be a problem, and that is if you walk into this little room and the floor is kind of slippery, I could see how you could actually go slipping and sliding and fall into the toilet. It would be kind of difficult to fall into one of our toilets. I don't drink, but I guess if someone's really drunk, I guess you could do it. But I could see it being relatively easy to fall into one of these. So you'd want to be very careful. All right. What else do I want to show you here in Japan? Oh, I want to show you this. This is the world's busiest pedestrian crossing. And on my YouTube channel, I want to take just a minute and I want to show you a video of the world's busiest pedestrian crossing. And here it is right here. So let's take a look at this. All right, so as you can see, there are a whole lot of people crossing in this busiest pedestrian crossing in the world. And this just goes to show you how big Tokyo is. A really big city. Okay, someone asked in the chat box about cars, and what I have discovered is in many parts of the world, cars are significantly smaller than they are here in the U.S. Many of our cars, I call them boats. Some of these SUVs are as big as people's apartments in some countries. I'm being a little funny here, but generally in a lot of other countries around the world, their cars are significantly smaller than ours here. Someone asked if I had ever traveled to India, and yes, I have. And let's go ahead and go to India right now. If you joined me a few minutes early, I was playing a couple of videos from my YouTube channel from India. India is a fascinating place to travel. However, if you have never traveled abroad, I would probably advise against making that your first destination. And the reason is for a few. Number one, India is the second most populated country in the world. This is the Indian flag. And there are roughly about 1.2, 1.3 billion people living in that one country. China, by the way, is the most populated country. It is estimated that in the next 4 to 5 years, India will surpass China and become the most populated country in the world. So there are a lot of people. This is their currency, and there's Gandhi there on one of their notes. Another reason that you may consider not making India your first stop is because there is a lot of poverty. And if you are an empathetic person at all, much like I am, it can be very difficult seeing all of the poverty. It can be very challenging. A great educational experience. If you want an awesome educational experience, India is probably one of the places that should be at the top of your list because their culture and society are so radically different than ours. Sometimes when I talk to my sociology students about travel and they can see all of my enthusiasm, they're like, hey, Professor Guillette, where would you recommend going? I'm thinking about going to France. I'm thinking about going to Italy. I'm thinking about going to Germany. Those are all wonderful places to travel to, and I highly recommend it. However, they're so what I call Americanized that you're not going to get the best cultural experience that you can get because so much of their culture is like our culture and vice versa. Yes, there are clearly differences, but I guarantee you, if you go to India, you're going to see things that you simply will just not see anywhere else. One of those things that you're going to see will be cremation. And here is a family. I'm assuming this is the family of maybe this person here that's deceased, that they bring down by the river and they cremate. And they're right there while it's happening. Now, again, if you joined me earlier, I was showing a video of the cremation process along the Ganges River in Varanasi, India. And I'm not going to take the time to show you now because I want to show you other places so you can go back on my YouTube channel and see that. But you're not going to see that in the US. Most Americans, and actually I challenge you to do this. Go on my YouTube channel after we're done, find the video that talks about cremation on the Ganges, on the in Varanasi. There are 21, almost my second most popular video on YouTube. It's currently my third. And read what comments people have put in there. And the comments are not very nice at all. And what these people are they're being extremely egocentric. What they're saying is, oh, we don't do that here. That's gross, that's disgusting, that's wrong. Well, I can assure you that if you were born and raised in India, you'd probably be a Hindu. That's the predominant religion. Probably. You might be a Muslim, but you'd probably be Hindu. And cremation would be a very normal thing. It would be part of your life and part of your culture. And so we should never, ever go about judging other people's cultures and how they speak and their values and opinions without understanding where they're coming from. We should never look at other people's ways of life through our own cultural lens because guess what? They're going to be the losers and we're going to be the winners. And that's not fair. And it does work both ways, by the way. It's not just we Americans looking at other countries saying, oh, that's bad, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that, we do it better. They're doing the same thing. This is a very human thing. But I think educated people need to be better than that. We need to learn and research about other people. And it's not that we immediately have to say, okay, that's wonderful, that's great. We don't have to convert to their way, but I think if we better open our minds to why they're doing what they're doing, we'll go, okay, makes sense. That's my little cremation story. The number one tourist attraction, of course, is the Taj Mahal in India. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, worth the visit just to see that alone. Cows are very sacred in the Hindu religion. They don't eat cows in India, or Hindus don't. So you will find cows everywhere in the market, in the middle of the streets. They are worshipped as gods, and that was kind of odd to see cows in the middle of the street, and not an American thing, not something that we see very much here, but very interesting. Matter of fact, if you go to McDonald's, if you look at the McDonald's menu, you can't see it on that one. I have it here in one of my other pictures. Here you go. No hamburgers. They eat a lot of them are vegetarian, or they eat a lot of chicken or fish. But you go to McDonald's there, no beef on the menu. I'm a Buddhist, and as a Buddhist, one of the reasons I wanted to go there was to go and see some of the Buddhist sites. And so Buddha, when he lived 2,500 years ago, was born and did a lot of teaching in northeast India, what is now currently northeast India. And so I got to see quite a few Buddhist sites. And this is at Bodh Gaya, where Buddha gained enlightenment. All right. Lots of people will go down to the river, not only for religious reasons. This lady here has lit some candles and she's letting them go, but others will come down and bathe and clean themselves in the rivers. All right, so many other places I want to take you to, so I'm just going to have to keep us moving along. So let's see, where else do I like to take you here? Chile. If you are into astronomy, I'm very much into astronomy, as I mentioned earlier. I like to take my telescope out, like to set it up. I take lots of pictures of galaxies and nebula and stars, and you can see some of those pictures on my website here if you'd like to look at them. I'm not going to take the time to show you now. But for example, this is a picture. It looks like a blue screen and it's Photoshop. It is absolutely not. This picture was taken in the northern part of Chile in what's called the Atacama Desert. It's one of the driest places on earth, and it has very, very little, no light pollution. And you can see the Milky Way right there. We should be able to see the Milky Way right here if we walked out on a clear night, cloudless night, but we have so much light pollution that we can barely see just a few stars. But we should be able to see the Milky Way, but so much light pollution. And here we have two dwarf galaxies of the Milky Way. All right, so if you're into astronomy, you definitely want to go to Chile. Here are some pictures I took from a plane over the Andes Mountains. All right, I checked the chat box real quick. Okay, we're looking good. I want to take you to the most liberal country that I've been to, and I'm going to follow that up with the most conservative country I've ever been to. Liberal, of course, for those who aren't familiar, is, as I define it, open-minded, willing to entertain, that you don't know everything, you don't have all the answers, willing to change and adapt to new things, new ideas, new theories. And Scandinavia, the countries in Scandinavia, specifically Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, are some of the most progressive, liberal countries in the world. These are my people. And so there's Frosted Flakes. They call them Frosties. Now I'm going to show you pictures. All of you, I believe, are in a humanities class, so I think you've probably seen something like this. If for some reason you are easily offended by nudity, then you probably want to look away. This is college, so I think you can handle it. But I want to show you how different people define things. This is the side of a city bus in the city of Copenhagen, Denmark. And you can clearly see women's breast. Now, I didn't get the whole ad in there, but the ad is about breast cancer awareness. They don't have the hang-ups in Europe, specifically in Scandinavia, that we do about sexuality and nudity. And so for Danes, as they're called, to see this go by on a city bus in the city means nothing to them. Okay? Big deal. Imagine one of the buses in Central Florida, one of the Lynx buses going around Central Florida with this on the side. Probably wouldn't go over very well, would it? All right. They are very climate conscious in Denmark. They are very active in looking for ways to produce green energy, for example, windmills. And they, when they do have cars, as like in Japan and many other parts of the world, their cars are very small, but many of them like to travel by bicycle. And so here you see lots and lots of bicycles parked downtown where people will travel by bike on their, on bike to their place of business or to school. You might go, well, you know, that's a city, and you know, maybe I'd do that if I lived in the city. Some of these people may travel what we would consider to be a long distance on a bicycle. For example, I stayed with a family where one of the household members was a professor at a university, and he biked 20 miles to the university he taught at, back and forth each way. So 40 miles a day biking. It's all about perspective, getting a lot of good exercise in there. Very liberal country. Now, let me take you to one of the most conservative countries that I've ever traveled to in the world. Now, conservative, how do I define conservative? Traditional, not as likely to want to adapt to new ideas, change, kind of wanting to keep things as they have been, not as open-minded. And so I take you now to the United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates is basically a country that's a desert. And it's considered a oil-rich country because they have had a lot of oil that they have exported around the world. So they're very well-to-do. The problem is they're running out of oil. There's only so much oil. And so they have determined that they need to do something before they run out of oil, because if they have nothing to export to the world, their economy will collapse. So what they've done is created one of the most unique places you can ever travel to, with some of the most elegant hotels in the world, like the Burj Al Arab, like the tallest building in the world, this one here, the Burj Khalifa. This is 163 floors tall. To give you an idea how tall it is, most of the tallest buildings in the world top out at around 110, 115 floors. This is 163, so this is a super tall building. They have some of the biggest, most elegant malls in the world. This is the Dubai Mall. In one of their malls, I forget if it's the Dubai Mall or the Mall of the Emirates, they actually have a snow skiing park where they manufacture snow, and you can go snow skiing inside of the mall. So very, very neat place to go. But as I said, it's very, very conservative. So let me show you how conservative it is. They will post signs like this outside of many different buildings. This was for the mall. They want you to dress respectfully, as they define respectfully. So they prefer men to not be in shorts. They would like women to be fully covered. This is where a lot of women that are Muslim will wear burqas, where you can only see just a little slit for them to see out of. But also notice down here, no kissing or overt display of affection. Whereas in the U.S., you know, a couple may walk in the mall and hold hands or kiss each other. That is seen as very culturally disrespectful in this very conservative country. Okay, so very interesting. All right. Let's see here. So many places I'd like to take you to. Let me take you to Cambodia. This building here may or may not look familiar to you. I don't know. This is called Angkor Wat. Currently, it's a Buddhist temple in Siem Reap, the city of Siem Reap, originally built as a Hindu temple. It is the largest single site. Let's see. It is the largest religious building in the world. Okay, and currently a Buddhist temple. Here's something very interesting. There may be a few of you attending that have seen or even do this if you happen to be from certain Central or South American countries or certain Asian countries. I saw this in Thailand. I believe I also saw this in Colombia, though I could be wrong. This is a man drinking his drink out of what I call a baggie. And for those, and I was not familiar with this until I first saw this in Thailand, where they will take the contents of, let's say, a glass bottle, they pour it into this baggie, and then you put a straw and you drink out of it. And for us Americans, if you aren't familiar with it, it's like, that's kind of odd to be drinking a liquid out of a baggie, but it works. It works. All right. All right. I'd like to take you to, let's say, Vietnam. Does anybody, let's see, Vietnam is here somewhere. Vietnam is a really good place to travel to get a great cultural experience. What I think a lot of Americans immediately might think of when they think about Vietnam is this right here. Okay, people working in rice fields, and that's that is a part of Vietnam. Vietnam is a developing country, but there are a lot of other things to see. It is a Buddhist country, so you can see a lot of Buddhist sites. You can see tunnels that were dug by what's called the Viet Cong during the Vietnam conflict, where they would dig tunnels that had multiple levels, and they would live in the tunnels during the day and come and fight the Americans that were over there fighting the Vietnam conflict. We won't get into any of that at the moment. Looks like a pretty modern city, and indeed this is Ho Chi Minh City, formerly known as Saigon. Here's something that you see in a lot of developing countries around the world. My phone's not working, and then they go out and try to fix it. It's like, wow, how can you figure out what the heck's going on there? So a lot of things are going on there. Let's see, we've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to take us to a few more places here. Thailand, I did speak of Thailand earlier. Here's what my recommendation would be to you. If you are considering traveling abroad, of course, now's probably not the time to do it. It may be impossible for us to go anywhere at the moment, but when travel starts to resume, if you're thinking about going abroad, I highly encourage you not to immediately think the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and so on and so forth. They're wonderful places to travel to, but I would encourage you to consider a country like Thailand. It does take a while to get there. It's about 24 hours of constant travel, but you will have an awesome cultural experience. Buddhism is the predominant religion there, so you're going to see lots of Buddha statues. Here, I went with a monk that I know, and we went on a 2-week trip over to Thailand and Sri Lanka, Burma, and Laos, and I saw a lot of Buddha statues. And this was probably the most beautiful one. It's in Chiang Mai, which is north of Bangkok, the biggest city and the capital. So you'll see lots of statues of Buddha. But you will also see a pretty modern city, lots of things to do. Um, Here's the grocery store. One of the neat things I like about going to countries that are not westernized per se is the language is very, very different. And if you take a look at here, you can see that the Thai language is radically different than the Romance languages, English being, of course, one of them. And so you go to France, Germany, Italy, you can look at, road signs, you can look at menus, and you can kind of figure it out, even if you don't know a second language in many cases. You go to a country like Thailand, where English is often well spoken, but you're going to look at these signs and you go, wow, there's no way I can figure that out. To me, that's kind of cool to see something really different from what we are familiar with. Oh, there you go. So I showed you one in, where was it, Colombia or Vietnam? So here we have one in Thailand, same thing. So they have a floating market, which is really cool to see. Okay. So we've got 7 minutes left, and I've got thousands of other places that I'd like to show you. Like I said at the very beginning, I'm not going to be able to show you very much. This is Shanghai at nighttime, China, of course. Wonderful place to travel to. Good cultural experience. Lots of Buddhas. A lot of people there will practice Buddhism, even though it's kind of like a secular country. This is the Oriental Tower in Shanghai. Very, very large city, as I mentioned earlier. China is the most populated country in the world, with about, I think it's about 1.4, 1.5 billion people, roughly. So lots of neat things to check out there. I haven't shown you very many videos. I know that I often have a lot of students from Central and South America. These pictures come from Colombia. Colombia was an awesome trip for me. Really enjoyed it a lot. They have a lot of traffic problems in the city of Bogota, which is the largest city in Colombia. They have severe problems with traffic, I should actually say. It's so bad that what they do is they have a system so that, let's say, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays of 1 week, if your license plate ends in an odd number, you can drive Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, but you can't drive Tuesdays and Thursdays. And next week, it's the opposite. And it's trying to get some of the cars off the road. And so a lot of people use mass transportation. But look at the size of this bus. This is like two and a half times the size of one of our Lynx buses here in Orlando. So there's the Colombian flag. They have a really neat cathedral that's built in an old salt mine. So, I am going to, I think, stop for a moment and ask if anyone, because we only have 5 minutes left, does anyone have any questions that you would like to ask me about my travels that I can answer? And if so, please make sure that you put it in the chat box. Also, let me make another announcement. I made this at the beginning, but it's very, very important. If you are a Valencia College student and you're attending this, in order to get some type of credit for some class, it is very important that you put your first name, your last name, and your Valencia identification number in the chat box. Okay, what I will do is after this video gets processed by YouTube, takes about 24 hours, sometimes a little more, I will go back through, look at the live chat, copy down names and VID numbers, and send them to the appropriate person so that you get credit for this. I want to make sure that you get credit and that you don't miss out if that's why you're attending this. Okay, so any questions? I'm not seeing any questions. If you have not already, again, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. These are pictures from what we used to call Burma, which is now Myanmar. some young Buddhist girls on the back of a pickup truck. One of the things that they do here is they often will put this on their creams on their faces and walk around, and it's like a cream that you would rub in your face to moisturize it, but instead of rubbing it in, they just leave it on their face like that, and a lot of people that live there will do this. So subscribe to my channel. Like I said, if you're interested in astronomy, I do astronomy talks once a month. The next one is Sunday night at 8 p.m. on galaxies. All right, so I'm looking at the chat box. I'm not seeing any questions. This is Sri Lanka. Awesome place to visit. This is their flag. This is a growing city of Colombo right here. You can see a video I have on my YouTube channel that talks about this rapidly growing, expanding city. They're hoping for it to become a major seaport. Okay. All right. Well, I believe that we are just about to the end. I want to leave you with this thought. I mentioned earlier that life is very short. And it is. So it's important that we live life and that we try things and that we aren't afraid. There are too many people that are afraid of everything. And there are some things to be afraid of. There's no question. But you have to balance being cautious with living life. And the example I like to use is skydiving. Now, I went skydiving many years ago. It's actually been about 20 years now. And I did it not because I thought I'd be really big into skydiving, but I did it because I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to say, you know, can I do this? Can I survive this? Can people die skydiving? Yes, people do die skydiving. But a lot of people don't die skydiving. And so if we're constantly fearful of everything that we do in life, we're never going to do anything. And I believe, I have a saying, and the saying is, living is right on the edge of not being dangerous, but living life like an adventure. That's where living is. When you're right on the edge of making yourself feel uncomfortable. That's maybe what I should say. Living life is being on the edge of your comfort zone. And if you're never on the edge of your comfort zone, then you are not living life. Live life. There I am, jumping out. And I lived to tell about it. Here I am. I hope that you have enjoyed our very short time together. I hope that I have inspired you to travel the world. It's an awesome thing to do. Stay in school, continue your studies, take school very seriously. It will pay off in the long run. Learn to love to learn. And take sociology if you haven't taken it. So thank you so much for joining me. It's 1 o'clock, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
what did you think of your skydive? Yeah, did a great job. So, maybe we'll see you again?
Well, we have a couple of people.
I don't think so.
Yeah, all right.
Next summer.